This is a big stream because I'm going out to all channels. Let me just make sure that the stream health is good. Welcome to everyone who's jumping in the stream. I'm going to be making some pretty big announcements, and then also allow me to grab some links. So far it looks like we're live on Vimeo. YouTube I haven't checked, but I'm sure it's probably just fine. And it seems like it should go to LinkedIn. Yeah, we're going to LinkedIn. Okay, so I am streaming to all channels, and then like I said, let me get a link to the dojo members so folks know how to access the event. Copy event link. Okay. So if you're in the dojo, I'm dropping the link now for kind of what's going on. So this is live right now. Let's see, live now. For those who, well, obvious, I guess if you're watching this, you know this is live right now. So this is going to be an interesting announcement. We've been working on the DevSecOps Dojo for some time now, over a year. And as a result, we have gone through the dojo's first 1 year cycle for our own company program that we've built. And so what we do is we generally teach what I refer to as 3-year development cycles, which we are entering year 2 of our development cycles, which I'll talk about. Because year 1, let me get into like, what is the dojo? We teach DevSecOps, but instead of having people go and take like classes or things like that, I teach developers how to develop, like use developing skills to engineer your career with engineering skills. You can apply to jobs, or you can engineer your way in your career. And so because we have an online world, what that means is like the internet, it is code, which means you can code things on the internet, like all things. You can code how your posts show up, when your posts show up. You can code an AI to help you find jobs. As a matter of fact, the entry freemium of the DevSecOps Dojo for anyone who joins is you get an AI that basically just follows like your activity to help bring you opportunities to help you get a job and all that good stuff. So basically, by joining the dojo, we automatically start applying like data management to your LinkedIn profile so that you get to use data science to data science your way with DevSecOps into a job. And so we start by teaching people how to start by creating data points in the form of LinkedIn posts. The reason why is because DevSecOps is so complicated, and teaching 3-year cycles is so complicated that we have to have a weekly like development task that benefits everyone, that if you do it forever, you can eventually automate it, and then it will automate your career hunt. So the first thing that we do in the DevSecOps Dojo is we automate your career search, whether you're looking for customers, whether you're looking for a job. It doesn't really matter. Who is the DevSecOps Dojo for? It's anything but beginner friendly. Let me just say that, and I'll put it in the green tile, because why not? It's not beginner friendly. So the DevSecOps Dojo, the reason why I'm emphasizing that it's not beginner friendly is because there are a lot of things that you kind of have to be familiar with before just like jumping into working with us in the DevSecOps Dojo, unless you're a little bit of a glutton for punishment. The first thing is easy, like step 1 is easy. So if you join the DevSecOps Dojo, making LinkedIn posts as like our entry into DevSecOps, like how to build CI/CD with LinkedIn. Well, that's right. We teach CI/CD with LinkedIn, but we start by teaching you the manual journey of posting manually, posting your journey manually, documenting manually, and then automating that manual task. So why LinkedIn? Because we can code with it. Why am I not telling you to make cold calls and phone calls? Because you can't code cold calls to try to like go find jobs or whatever. But either way, the real point is I'm trying really hard to focus on the thing that has benefited our members the most and people who've kind of worked with us the most, which is doing real world things that give you real world results. And instead of teaching with lessons or teaching with programs or teaching, we're just going to give everyone work. We're just going to put you to work and you just get experience. Now I'm going to talk about how that works because that's complicated too. I'm going to have to figure out an easy way to explain what's going on in the DevSecOps Dojo beyond the fact that we did just launch this thing called the Underground Nexus, which is we have our own cloud. So one thing that the DevSecOps Dojo then provides is if you are a researcher, this is free. If you're not a researcher, this is not for commercial use unless you like went through our program with us. But we built a DevSecOps research mesh, which is for R&D, and we do pay for it. Like, it's not a free thing for us, but we give it to researchers for free. How do we keep it free for researchers, for everyone who joins us as our members? Basically by providing business services to folks with the mesh. So, our team's growing, all that good stuff. And so what this means is because we provide our own mesh, basically like it's a cloud. So let me just dumb it down a little bit. So cloud. Maybe I'll just say cloud for researchers. So if you're a researcher, you're trying to learn. So whether you're trying to research DevSecOps and like all those things, like learning how CI/CD works, learning how to practice different things with stuff like that, learning how secure integration, secure delivery. How do you make sure that like from the moment you start doing development, that security is integrated into the whole process, like all that stuff. So once again, we provide that part for researchers, which over the past year, we spent the past year building this cloud. And now we can use the cloud to host people, and we are hosting our own app that's a part of that, which the part of the cloud that researchers get access to is GitLab, which gives you the underground Nexus. Now this has to be like still one of the most confusing concepts I've ever tried to explain, because what we do is not conventional. Folks who've been getting into it know that it's kind of like building your own little side job, but for education, not for money. I mean, you make money. I have members who've made a lot of money, but I don't encourage people to join the dojo with money as the goal. Like, you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars doing DevSecOps. So I don't want people to focus on what you can make. It's not a get-rich-quick thing. Like, yeah, you can automate an income with DevSecOps, but it does mean putting those sleeves way up and coding, like, for hundreds of days. And so in order for... Like, so if we get into, like, where does the skill gap in terms of like people trying to get into cloud, people trying to get into Kubernetes, people trying to get into cybersecurity, cloud native, all these different things. In a lot of ways, I find that a lot of the skill gap comes from it's very hard to find ways to continually practice the skills. And so we're basically building the dojo into a continuous sandbox for building skills. And in our dojo sandbox, we're going to have project and research boards, which we're working on. And this isn't even the biggest part of the announcement. That, like, it's a lot going on. So we're going to have this is what I'm building right now. And one of the big ones is we just announced in another video, for anyone who caught that stream, where I was talking about the Underground Nexus. It's the tool that we're going to be using, and it's being distributed once again through GitLab and the Underground Nexus. So anyone who wants to work with our DevSecOps research mesh and either be a student, an apprentice, anything like that, or we're also going to open opportunities for people to use our DevSecOps service mesh as educators to teach like students and folks and stuff like that. So we're going to come up with ways to make it affordable for us to make it so that, like, say someone who has experience already, maybe you want to be a mentor to someone trying to learn how to code or trying to learn DevSecOps or trying to learn cybersecurity or something like that, and you want to be able to deliver technical lessons to this individual. The mesh that we have, I'm going to come up with a way to make it so that it's not going to break the bank for us to give like free education services. So I'm going to have to do a lot of fundraising, so it's complicated. So what we're going to do to make all of this affordable for us, because some money doesn't fall from the sky, so money's falling from me, and it's like all of it, but that's okay. We'll make it back, so I'm not worried about that part. The money comes and goes. More importantly, free services for everyone else will have some other benefits, and like I said, we'll figure it out. So let me tell you, how are we going to survive this as the people who fund all of this, so that we can continue to grow it? Because just because I'm providing free services, I could try to do that forever, and then once the well runs dry, there goes all the services for everyone. So we do have to sustain capital. So the way that we're going to also teach DevSecOps, so how... So this is a really big question, because once again, like, I'm a business owner. I'm not like a, I don't know, enthusiast. I guess I'm somewhat of an enthusiast, but really it's like the minute you have like hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up into something or more, then you start to get a little specific about how that gets managed, so that you can keep it from just like dissolving into dust. And so because we are just bringing in a whole bunch of stuff, like we can host like thousands of individuals and stuff like that, but we have to have a way to sustain the model and grow the model so that we can continue to educate more people for free. And so then let's talk about, like, how do we keep it free, right? How do we keep it so that people can come in, start learning DevSecOps by getting to work for themselves, right? So you're going to get to work for yourself. And I'll do a little bit of like a GitLab lesson, I guess, today. Well, I have to be careful showing GitLab because it might have sensitive information in there. Well, I have multiple ones. I'll have to set up like a demo GitLab or something like that, because I want to provide GitLab lessons, and I'll set up like a demo thing. But anyways, there will be lots of lessons on that, and if I might do like a lightweight lesson. I don't know, doing technical stuff on videos when you're doing like CI/CD, these are things that take like days. So I've learned that trying to make like something that normally takes like maybe 2 or 3 weeks and trying to make like a 15-minute, like, here's how to do this thing. We teach 3-year cycles, so it's really hard to make like really short to the point videos on here's how to do one tiny part of a 3-year cycle. 15 minutes, go. No, like it's like a lot of the things that we teach take months and months and months and months and months. And what I will say is every single member that I've worked with who's kind of, whether or not it's directly through our stuff or other resources around, anyone who's been basically like doing development where they're like, I'm going to learn how to code. Usually you run into this like immediate surgence. If you have like a group or you go join a group, you might go sign up for a program that's like for people learning how to code. And you'll find like the first week or the first 2 weeks, everyone in that group learning how to code with you is like, yeah, coding, yeah. And then you'll find, if it's like a group of like 1,000 people that you're doing it with, then after about like 2 weeks, like less than 100 out of like if it's like some big thing, less than 100 will still be doing it. Really. So I've found that folks who will do something like coding every day, and I guess there's one thing that's called like 100 days of coding, like programs like that. I find things like that translate very well to jobs, because a lot of what makes people make it in the career space is being able to stomach the dry stuff and stomach the boring stuff. And the reality is, as soon as like development like punches someone in the mouth, a lot of people just like dip out. They're like, oh, this is cool. I'm gonna go make $100,000 coding. It's gonna be so cool. And then they start coding, and they're like, yeah. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, I hate this, or they're like, this is too hard, or they're like, well, I can't. You got to just keep going, and it can be very stressful. So a lot of the purpose of the DevSecOps Dojo, especially because I'm trying to work with folks who aren't in the beginner stage where you're trying to like get over that hump. Let me help you get over that 100 days of coding. That's really a lot of what the DevSecOps Dojo is about. So my general statement is, if you're not going to code for like a minimum of 21 days, you're probably not going to be a developer. And maybe that's not true. I could be very wrong about that. But if someone trying to pick up code as a practitioner, this is an opinion of mine, if they can't, at least at the minimum, get themselves to do 21 days straight of coding, like I don't see them translate into the market after that. So like, let's see, 100 days of coding. One thing you can join that, even if you're a DevSecOps Dojo member, I don't think that any of these things compete with me. To me, all education's education. So if you went to college and you paid a lot of money, that's education. You make that money back. If you got a bunch of certifications, that's education. You make that money back. If you learned something, that's education. You can make money with it. Education. So if you're doing like multiple things, you might burn out, but still, the one thing that I see is like things like this, people who actually stick with stuff like this and actually complete something like 100 days of coding, even if they miss some, maybe they try to code 100 days and then maybe they miss like a total of 20 days out of it. I don't know, 15 days or something like that. Not a big deal, because for the most part, they're consistent enough to build like a little bit of like a habit with the development process. And so anyways, I just want to emphasize that because the dojo, it's also not going to grow fast. If I'm going to be really honest, I've done the like mass development thing and the mass teaching thing and all this stuff, and what I've found is that quality programs turn the masses off because most people want like a quick win. A quick win. And quick wins don't usually translate to building a business or building a DevSecOps platform. So if you're trying to build a cloud or learn cloud or get really good at it, you got to stick with it. You got to do it for a while. And it takes a long time. If you spend 1 year trying to learn cloud, at the end of that year, you'll feel like you know less than you maybe knew at the beginning of the year. And that's a thing. It's a thing that happens. It's called imposter syndrome sets in. You have the opposite, where folks who are oftentimes beginners in a space will sometimes like, well, what'll happen is someone will come into a place, maybe they do have imposter syndrome or not, and then if they start doing things, they'll build competence, and competence does build confidence. So what'll happen is people will build competence, they'll get more competent, then they'll get more confident, and then all of a sudden have this realization that there's all these things that they don't know, and then the confidence just like falls through the floor. The beginning effect is called the Dunning-Kruger effect when we're trying to build stuff. So let's see, and then after that, like that plummet where someone feels like they know everything, and then all of a sudden they like within months will go from thinking that they know a lot to thinking they know nothing at all. Imposter syndrome. That's the difference between imposter syndrome and confidence. Oftentimes, confidence is a precursor to imposter syndrome setting in. Anyways, I don't know, I'm getting into like psychology and all this stuff, but it's relevant if you're trying to become a developer. Like, is that a goal of yours? Is it not a goal of yours? But anyways, if you're not coding for at least like 100 days or something like that, 100 days of coding might give you the Dunning-Kruger effect. And then as soon as you hit that 100 days, then it's like after the confidence sets in, then it's, anyways. So how are we going to keep this going? So what we actually did and this is going to sound a little interesting, but we're going to create something that's like a nonprofit, but I come from nonprofit people. My father was part of starting a huge nonprofit, all this good stuff. I think there's nothing wrong with nonprofits. But if you have the ability to fund something yourself, you can have more control over the program and its trajectory than, say, like running a nonprofit. And we're doing something that's scientific in nature. So what I find is like people who are good with like financing, funding, and all that stuff usually don't know anything about like development programs and helping people get better at development and how development works. It's a completely different practitioner that takes like rubbing your face against sandpaper for like years to really kind of be like, oh, I see. So anyways, we're going to do it by okay, so this is where it gets crazy sounding, but we are actually going to make this work, and we've already tested the model, and we've already placed a few jobs in testing and experimenting, all that good stuff. I've been spending a lot of time over the past year experimenting with job placement. How do developers get jobs efficiently? How do developers get the jobs they want versus, you can get a job. Great, anyone can get a job. But getting a job you want, or getting a job that's exciting, or a job that you're like, this is my dream job. Getting a dream job and getting a job. Being a developer for someone who's willing to suffer coding 100 days to then roll into like, big incomes, like that's a dream job. A lot of people just like dream of being able to have that kind of experience, and for good reason. So anyways, let's see. I don't know. I haven't been following the YouTube chat, so if anyone's chatting at me on YouTube, maybe I'll go look real quick. But yes, we're going to be starting some companies, and I'm going to talk about that in just a sec, because at first it started as a role play, but I'm going to go over to YouTube real quick. We started off just role playing as companies, basically. Let's see. Let me make sure that there's not like weird audio things. Oh yeah, there's a few embrace the grind. Yeah. So now I'm looking at YouTube. Thanks for joining the YouTube chats, everyone. I'm checking that chat now too. But yeah, so that's a good way to put it. I'm just going to put that on the screen. Embrace the hustle. With code, it's different from like hustling for business. But code hustle is different from like entrepreneur hustle. Code hustle is like, you might be modding a video game. You might be like modding Skyrim. That's fun stuff, right? Well, if you like Skyrim and you like modding, maybe you don't like those things. But do something you like, right? And if you're doing something you like, it's going to be a lot of work. And so you keep up that hustle. And like, so code, if you don't find it fun or exciting, like it's going to be hard to stomach because it's really dry work. So what kind of projects, because you have to qualify for these, but we started a company that we originally were calling Chaos Labs Inc. that started off as a role play, and we were just role playing. That's what it originally was. And we were like, we're going to talk about how DevSecOps organizations like launch and then monetize a DevSecOps product, because if you're trying to do DevSecOps and you have no idea the value of your skills, it's a lot harder to like negotiate your way into a company when you're negotiating to like a CEO or like someone who's not technical, like a chief finance officer or something like that, and they're trying to hire you to do DevSecOps, and they're like, oh yes, we want to hire you, and you're like, hi, I can do DevSecOps, and they're like, you can do what? And you're like, yeah, I can. They have no idea what you're talking about. So if you can't talk your value to someone who's like a business person, and then you're trying to get hired, you got to just hope that they might be technical too. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. If they are technical, it's a lot easier to negotiate. But the purpose of the role plays is like a lot of developers. One of the things that bothers me a little bit is the people who tend to get jobs aren't necessarily, they might be, but aren't necessarily good developers. Oftentimes people with good interview skills are terrible developers and have really good people skills. Or people who tend to be terrible at interviews might be really, really, really good developers. They might have terrible resumes, terrible copy skills, terrible presentation, terrible hygiene. I don't know if that's something that we want to talk about or not for some. But anyways, they might be terrible at all these things, but sometimes the best are the ones who are bad at everything else. And so they don't get the job. So then who gets hired? The people who don't know what they're doing. No offense, I'm not saying that. There are people who get hired who do know what they're doing. So this is not a diss on anyone. And then sometimes those people who get hired who don't know what they're doing, they learn on the job. So people still learn on the job. It doesn't mean that the person who got hired who has no idea what they're doing never knows what they're doing. But it still comes back to one of the number one reasons I see developers not get the roles they want is because they don't understand how to negotiate their value. So the purpose of Chaos Labs was to teach how to negotiate your value. So then we had enough conversations and people were like, well, what if we kind of made like an actual little company? And I'm like, we could probably do that. So on the 15th, just this past weekend, we launched Chaos Labs Inc. as a more decentralized company that is just like crypto based, so we can just like launch. And then after that, there was enough interest and requests. We're like, oh, I would do like a job or a side thing or just do some work. I want to do that. And so we decided, well, what if we just straight up fund the whole thing to just be an actual business where you can come and get paying projects, paying work. We were all going to try to figure out how to like teach people the general process of monetizing themselves, like with their own work or their own projects. But now we're going to take another step forward, and Chaos Labs Inc. was already taken by someone else who started a company called Chaos Labs Inc. And so clearly the model works. chaoslabs.xyz. I'll probably try to find this person and connect with them. I think it's a great business idea. I think what they're doing is probably awesome. And we're all about this sort of thing. And so we're just going to use a different name. But really, oddly enough, like whoever started Chaos Labs Inc. here is doing kind of like the same kind of things that like our role plays were kind of talking about. And for a Web3 world, or at least it looks like it's for a Web3 world. Anyways, so we can't call it this, but it is the same kind of business. It's the same type of business. So instead, what we are going to call the company from a legal standpoint, so if anyone's like, how come I'm not getting technical training? Business is just that slow. We have to do litigation management. I have to manage the legal. We have to research, like, what are we allowed to use? So we are going to call the company a name that we can call the company, which is Underground Ops, which we already purchased the domains. We already have all of the funding for the hosting for the whole year met and matched and ready to go. And we are about to shell out. So we have our executive in training, who is Xavier, who, let's see. Thanks again, Xavier, for joining us. As I'm teaching Xavier how to basically be a CEO of a company, and not just me, I'm going to bring in people to interview with Xavier, other executives, other CEOs, because Xavier is learning how to be a CEO. Bet you never heard of this before, is having a CEO intern for someone who's going to then actually just graduate into being an actual CEO and have its income. That's what we're doing. That's what's happening here. Why Xavier? He has been a part of a lot of, well, like not just a lot. He's pretty much been a part. I'm trying to think. Is there a program he hasn't been a part of or joined or been there for the whole journey? Xavier was there when we were building bare metal assets for the first time before we had a cloud. He was one of the first people to jump on the cloud and test the cloud. He also is running his own hustles and always learning, all that good stuff. So ultimately, I just want to say congratulations again for that opportunity. But instead of it being just a pure learning company, we are going to turn it into a real company. actually. So Underground Ops is becoming a real startup. And it's going to be a more of a public-facing startup. So maybe we'll call it an open source company. And we're going to staff it with project boards that dojo members can qualify for to get experience, where they're not projects like for people who are already like practitioners and already like, doing, well, I mean, if you are, I guess, it's just a play. Whoever you are, if you're just trying to get experience, and you sometimes like you might already have a job, and you might like your job, but you want to learn some DevSecOps, and you want to make a little side money while learning it. Well, you could instead go to college and pay tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, or you could come into Dojo for 3 years and just start building. And if you don't keep building past 21 days, maybe it's something, just the timing's not right and you just need to wait till it's a better time. But once you're in the dojo, because we were able to fund it to basically be free forever, and our freemium, while our freemium costs us it's only like $2,000 a month, but that $2,000 a month benefits all of our members, everyone who joins the DevSecOps Dojo. So we pay that, the members don't. Members don't pay that, we pay that. And then it gives them a means to start using their own personal data for DevSecOps to engineer a career by making LinkedIn posts. And you have an AI when you join the dojo, our AI greets you too. And if you request reports from the AI, I can actually provide those reports. At some point, we'll come up with better ways for people to get access to those reports. If someone is paying for I think it's like the $150 a month LinkedIn version, I can just port that AI data over to you. But that does mean that you have to be paying LinkedIn $150 a month. Yeah. I guess it's all expensive, I guess. Business is expensive. I'm learning that I think I need to talk about the expenses a lot more, because it's cool and all to make a lot of money. But I think it's important to create the perspective of, why do you need to make a lot of money? If you can't afford your services, or if you don't know how much your services cost, or don't know how to budget your services, you're not going to build or grow a company. And if you're trying to be a DevSecOps professional and you're trying to negotiate your value to someone, and you don't even know why your skills matter, or what part of your skills helps a company grow or make money, it's a much harder negotiation to get the job. You want to negotiate a raise? Know your value. You don't even have to be a business owner to benefit from knowing why you help the company get you paid and everyone else paid. If you understand how to, so the company has to be able to afford you, everyone else at your company that you work with, and then they have to be able to afford all their services. They have to be able to afford to go to market. Company bills easily hit some companies $100,000 a month in bills. Now that's a larger company, of course, but even a smaller company, I'm pretty sure it's not that. Maybe I'll ask around. I don't know what's normal, but $10,000 a month in business bills is pretty low. I don't know. I could be wrong. If someone on LinkedIn, correct me if that's wrong. that could just be really high. But in cloud, that's pretty good. I feel like I've run tests that cost $5,000 just to run a cloud test. I'm going to test this cloud resource. As a matter of fact, if you're trying to use Azure, and you want to use Azure for development 24/7, or 40 hours a week, let's not go 24/7 because that's way more money. If it's 36 cents per hour for the Azure node that you're renting, 36 cents per hour, it doesn't sound like a lot up front, because it's oh yeah, 36 cents, only 36 cents. Just wait till you've worked 40 hours a week for let's just do the math. Let's do the math on some cloud math for understanding. If you don't know the cost of your DevSecOps, how are you going to help a company like build a solution that's going to be viable for their margins. Ultimately, your solutions have to be viable for a company's margins so that they can stay in business and so that they can help you. So anyways, let's do some quick math. We're going to say, let's say you're going to make a spend on a cloud. Let's actually just go straight over to Azure cloud costs. Let's just take a look. Pricing overview. Let's start there. Now, this is a very high level thing that I'm going to... Oh, this is actually not as bad as I thought it would be. 0.4 cents per hour for a Linux virtual machine. That's not too bad. 29. Anyways, let's see. Let's find... I just want to find the hourly rate for the different ones. Substantial. Maybe now is not the time for me to look this up. Here, I'll use an example I'm more familiar with. Let's go with code spaces. Code spaces. Oh, this is better. Okay, so let's say you want a cloud instance that your developers can work in. It might cost you 36 cents an hour. It's pretty affordable, which it is. I would say it is. It's still going to cost at least $1,000, and I'll show you why. So let's see. In a month, for someone who's working on this full-time, if they were to develop in this for 40 hours a week, if they wanted to do that. And oftentimes developers might develop more than that. So let's say then 36 cents times 40 hours, it's 1 week. Okay, so I guess it's not too bad. Let me... There we go. It adds up. Times... Actually, it's not too bad at all. So I guess it really depends on what you're doing, but your numbers are going to stack up. So it just depends on what you're running. But really, those cloud costs can hit the thousands. I need to, one of these days I'll go and do like a full like economics thing and grab the numbers ahead of time. One thing I'm pretty bad at is trying to do like last minute numbers, just like sitting here doing that live. It's not something I do very often. But it all costs money. So either way, we're going to help everyone start learning DevSecOps by giving you cloud resources that you don't have to pay for. And then I do need to come up with some means of like how are we going to run these services. So that's part of the DevSecOps Dojo training, is we're going to build the services kind of with the dojo members and talk with all the dojo members on how are we going to build the services, how are we going to launch the services, how are we going to manage them, how are we going to make them work. And that kind of covers a lot of the high-level stuff I wanted to touch on. Now, some skills that everyone should probably kind of get familiar with is you're not going to get far if you don't know what Docker files are. So let's see. Now, you can always join the dojo even if you don't know anything, and just ask the members like for direction, guidance. You can talk to me too, talk to any of us there, and be like, hey, I'm trying to learn this stuff, but I am a beginner. And since it's not really for beginners, I don't have a lot of beginner-based trainings because there's like unlimited beginner-based trainings out there. So like YouTube channels that are probably worth checking out for people who are trying to get into is like, let's go to YouTube and let's take a look at a resident Docker captain, Nana. Or, oh, there we go. Tech World with Nana. I guess I'll subscribe too. Either way, if you're trying to get the basic skills so that you can just kind of get going, I would just spend a whole lot of time on Nana's channel. I could send you multiple places. There's a lot of great places to look. And maybe just ask other people. It's just like my memory can only remember so much. And if I'm just going to give someone a quick recommendation for like, oh, yeah, you just need to get up to speed? Oh, cool, yeah. Look, you can go and take the Docker tutorial for beginners. You will need to understand Docker basics. And Kubernetes, if you know nothing about Kubernetes, that's kind of okay because I will be spending more time making some Kubernetes trainings later on. It's probably still worth just learning some. Kubernetes is so complicated and confusing that it's worth just starting as soon as possible to try to start understanding something about Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a beast. I would even go so far as to say that if you're trying to learn Kubernetes, if you've spent over 30 days watching videos and not building Kubernetes, pump the brakes because you're gonna end up with imposter syndrome and then start to get anxiety and fear toward going toward the concept and potentially never get out the gate. Just start doing it. Download something with Kubernetes. Like you could get K3D Kubernetes. This is one that you can get. You get Docker, then you can run K3D. What is K3D? Tells you right here. It's a lightweight wrapper to run K3S Rancher Labs minimal Kubernetes distribution in Docker, right? So you're going to need to get familiar with Docker, or you can come to Dojo and get familiar that way, but that's just going to be a thing. Complete course. Yeah, and one of the reasons why I don't want to make a whole lot of content like that is because by the time I could make a whole bunch of videos on how everyone could learn Docker when there's already tons of highly produced stuff out there, I'd rather kind of focus on the things that others aren't teaching so much, and then I'll give you the stuff that is more readily available to find. You want to learn Docker? You can find that. So Docker, let's start with that. So the first thing that I do think if you want to get involved, you need to know Docker. Then the next thing that we will be using in the DevSecOps Dojo is Docker files. Yeah, I guess it all depends on the industry you're in. Different industries are definitely different. So to use our underground Nexus resources and hook into our cloud, this right here is pretty much a must. If you have at least this, if you can figure out how to use Docker files and you use Docker, those two things, you can get into doing DevSecOps with us. And then all of our resources live in the free GitLab is fine forever for what we're doing. We actually host our own ultimate pipeline, which for our projects, if you're trying to do something and you're in the dojo and you want to use something that requires ultimate or set up something, like we'll work with you on that so that you don't have to pay for those resources. And then for everyone getting involved with us, the free GitLab is fine forever. And that's also something that works with Docker. So we use Docker in place. We don't really use virtual machines. You can use virtual machines. We use a little bit of everything. What do we not use? I don't know what we don't use. We use like QEMU, Windows, OS 10, Linux, different flavors of Linux, maybe like 12 different flavors of Linux. I don't know. So many different flavors of Linux. Our DevSecOps service mesh has, I'll just count the operating systems I can see right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have a minimum of 9 unique operating systems all running underneath Docker in our DevSecOps service mesh, ranging from Windows to OS 10 to... So why Docker? Docker allows us to produce and provide uniform experiences and uniform application development processes, you name it. So then the next thing that's like optional learning, you can kind of learn Kubernetes with us, but learning some Kubernetes ahead of time, it'll make some of what we're getting into not as terrifying, because a lot of what we're doing is kind of terrifying. I'll show you directly. One sec while I pull up something terrifying. So let's see. For those who are in the mesh, I already have the repository for the DevSecOps Dojo Guild Research Board. So we're going to be operating a little bit like a guild. We'll huddle daily. You know, we're a crew. We're always building, always be building. And so those who've been building for a while will be able to help others. But the first thing that we're doing is I'm packaging the underground Nexus, which I made a video on before, a couple of videos on. And the core components of it are already available. I do have to, so everyone's be building with me. That's my style is we're just all gonna be building together. Not just me, but then everyone soon here. And this will be kind of the last time that it's like me leading the huddle. In the future, ideally, these company-led and company-built businesses that we're working on are gonna allow people to like choose kind of like what kind of projects they want, who they want to follow, who they want to build with, build little drop squad groups and build with the people they want to build with. But we want to focus on just get building, get some experience, get to work. And so we already have, we built a hidden domain. So this is the part that's going to be a little interesting. So some of you already have access to this, and I will give you a high level lesson on how to kind of get working with this for people who are in here. Once again, if you're a researcher, this is a resource that you're allowed to use. So Trafic is an API portal, and we set up a unique hidden domain to teach how to engineer domains, and also how to do basic cryptography. So right here, there are other ways that are probably more recommended for like production setting up like cryptography, but I'm going to be making lessons on like how do you set up like a basic standard encryption. How do you, oh yeah, someone made a good point. Like, so when you're doing like cloud stuff, like all these different things make costs go up. Someone made a good point. Cost for cloud goes up when you increase the compute power and memory. So cloud compute, it's just expensive. Yeah, so I don't know. If you can afford it, you can afford it. But if you're a student, you probably can't just afford some of this stuff. So anyways, let's see. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more in the future about how to build GitLab in a hidden domain that is designed to live in a VXLAN tunnel that can be isolated. Now, that's going to be probably a lot of lessons for me to really roll that out. But anyways, that's coming up here pretty soon. I'm still building out these resources to roll out these resources. And I have some of the source lessons in here. So for anyone who's in here, in order for you to kind of get learning if you're already using this, because I want some of you to know like how can you get building for those who are already here. To learn how to use these YAML files right here, I have some resources that'll kind of get you going. The Underground Nexus kickoff videos here, and then if you're in the dojo, this is accessible. If you're not in the dojo, then you can't access this. You can ask me for access. The only way to get access to this is by coming to the dojo and asking me for access for this. Or I think Randall can do it too. Either way, you got to come talk to us. Anyways, the templating here takes you to some links that you can use to kind of start building with. So if you want to get used to orchestrating Docker, this is a good guide for learning how to orchestrate Docker. So I'll even put this in the public chats too. So I'm just going to put this in LinkedIn and YouTube. So this anyone can just kind of do. So if you're trying to get into the dojo and you want to just kind of get started on something now, you can kind of just learn how to orchestrate with Docker first. Once again, learning. We're all about learning. How do you kind of get started to get some of the foundational skills to even know what this right here is, so that it's not just a huge head-scratching, terrifying monster. So then the next one is whether you're using a Raspberry Pi or Docker Desktop, because you can do the same thing with this link using like Docker Desktop. But this is an entire site that goes over how to build a serverless architecture with dedicated state management using Longhorn. This is pretty similar to the total kit that we use. So if you can go through this, you are ready to pretty much just start working. Really, really. So this is much harder, in my opinion, than the other one. Oh, the other one's kind of complicated. I don't know which one's harder. Let's not focus on what's harder. Let's focus on just giving you these resources, right? Even out in the so everyone can have these resources. If you're in the dojo, then you can access the where I put all this information. And then Docker Desktop. So like if you're not using, say, like a Raspberry Pi for development, then let me give you this. So anyone can just install this and kind of get started with everything we do just with this alone. I'm sure in LinkedIn it's going to be so messy. In YouTube it'll be a little more orderly. Okay. So I think that's kind of covering a lot of, there's so much going on. Anyways, so the big one is we use, the other part that is, here, I'll go over to, let me pull up another thing. Let me think about where that is. Anyways, that's how you, that's a good way to kind of get started, to start picking up like Docker, Kubernetes, orchestration. What's the difference? How do they work? Try them all. Don't try one, try all of them. That's my motto is, why try one when you can try them all? Or why use one when you can use them all? Which is why I'm into agnostic development. Because agnostic development's it's not about like, oh, we can do some things. Of course you can do some things. But I like using everything. Because some people are like, well, why would you use GitLab instead of GitHub? Believe it or not, I use both. Why use one when you can use them all? I don't understand why not just use them all. So that's kind of how I think, and I don't know if that's maybe a good way to think, but in cloud, it's beneficial. Outside of cloud, maybe it's a little crazy. So let's see. If anyone's in the dojo, I'm always building who knows what of who knows what. So let's see. Let me show this. And I do add all of the projects that I'm working on, like my progress. So if I'm working on a new Docker file for the Nexus, this is a foundational script that you can run in a Ubuntu container, but ultimately I'm going to turn this into a Docker file for Ubuntu. And it'll be an easier kit to strap and play with. So I don't know if anyone's trying to do that, but I have the... this is all stuff that's going into the GitLab, so you don't even have to play with these resources if you just want to wait till I put them out in the more professional location. It's just these things take so much time that it's like, we just launched a new company on the 15th that was originally a DeFi company, decentralized funding, and then we decided to just make it a full-on company that's more than decentralized funding, and that just happened like a day or two ago. And then finally, that brings us to Jenkins can do all the things. I love Jenkins. you can probably integrate Jenkins into everything. Yeah, we haven't been using Jenkins, but one of these days, just use all the things. Let's see, Docker files. I have these references. And I have this really giant, terrifying Docker file that I've been working on. So if anyone wants access to my sample Docker file, it's sitting in my DevSecOps Madness. Where did I put that? Let me scroll back down. It's chaos. It's madness. I called it my DevSecOps Madness channel because it's madness. Let's see. Here we go. This is the Docker file. If anyone wants to pause their screen to see what the base templating is for what I'm doing. Oh, it doesn't even show the whole sideways scroll. Well, that's terrifying. I forgot how terrifying that was. Well, anyways, I'm making a much cleaner version of this because this one builds a payload using Echo, because you can use Docker files to build and deploy payloads. And we're turning I'm making a spreadsheet that you can use as a template to build payload construction-based Docker files. And then I'm making one that doesn't just build. Anyways, it's a lot. So if anyone's wondering why have trainings not come out yet, it's because I have a lot of coding to do. And for those who are also coding with me, I have multiple people coding with me. So depending on who is like really feeling ready to roll, I guess the task of the day is to start playing with this. If you're like, oh, I want to get involved, start playing with this with me and help me clean it up. I'm going to basically, for anyone who knows what I'm talking about, I'll tell you what my goal is right now and what I'm working on, just straight up. And if anyone wants to steal my ideas, I mean, it's open source, so I guess it's not really stealing. So it's all open source stuff that's going out there, so anyone can use what I'm doing. It's all open source knowledge, open source things that I'm working on. But the thing that I'm doing is I'm going to replace where it says from Docker with from Ubuntu. And then on that kit, I'm going to remove all the Echo stuff and this part of it, package building. And basically, instead of building a payload with it, then I'm going to use... I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about right now. Probably not. Anyways. If there's a dojo member watching who's like, I know there's a lot of you working on things. It was actually Jermaine who came up with this alternative way for me to put this in the Docker file using Ubuntu instead of Docker and Docker, and then use Docker and Docker to distribute the payloads in the Ubuntu container. So it's like a... Anyways, I'm still working on that tooling, and so other members have helped. Jermaine's the primary contributor to that new modeling kit, which is superior to what I was originally going to release. And so, anyways, the Underground Nexus is ultimately going to be usable as a full-on, like, bounty hunting kit. Let's see. Let me access it. So you can do like bug bounties with it. You can do DevSecOps with it. It's somewhat like a code space, but it's basically like a modular operating system. It's just like Ubuntu or Debian, but it's edge-based. It's an edge-based hosting instance. So if you're using AWS Cloud has whatever system you're accessing all the way up in someone else's infrastructure, and then that's conventional public cloud, right? What this is our conventional public cloud contains build code mostly, and so our cloud deploys to what's called the edge, and so this is an edge cloud. And what edge cloud means is that you're offloading your compute, you're offloading your processing, you're offloading all of that stuff like away from the cloud and having it build locally in your network, which does mean that you have to have a system to pull it down on. But like Docker Desktop or a Raspberry Pi, you can use those for what's referred to as edge compute. And so it's an edge cloud. And let's say that you have like 10 people you work with and they all live in 10 different physical locations and no one's even close to each other. Then those 10 people with their edge clouds can have their 10 unique locations be one cloud, but most of the hosting is primarily all on the edge and the compute and processing is on the edge. And that's what makes this, I guess, different. Because otherwise it's just like, hey, we have Ubuntu Mate, amazing. And I don't know what applications are in here right now. Bunch of applications, right? Have your terminals and stuff. Let's see. You can install applications in these things. You can start coding. You can go crazy. I don't know. I'm probably going to type something I shouldn't. But anyways, this is an edge cloud. So and it deploys from that build code that I have that I will make lessons on that makes sense when I make lessons. This is not a lesson. This is me just talking about what we've been doing. Because I have to at least do that as well. Let's see, where did I put my whiteboard? Whiteboard. Oh, I just realized I have that video in the background playing, but it doesn't matter. So let's see. Where was I trying to... Oh yeah, I was trying to go back to... Actually, I was trying to go back to GitLab one last time, and then I'll kind of wrap up the stream. So getting back to GitLab... So this is this, and this is this. So if you know how to deploy this, I will say the one thing you need to make this work is a Pi-hole, and you need to set up your DNS records to, or well, actually, you don't even necessarily need that. You would have to comment this out with a little pound sign. So if you were to put a pound in front of the middleware that manages the password, then you can deploy this. Well, you might have to comment some of these others out too, because then it won't load balance. Well, you might have to build a domain. It might work without building a domain. Anyways, I'm going to make an auto building script at some point so that everyone doesn't have to know all of this stuff. There's like so many moving parts that it's terrifying. So my goal is to take something that this took us like how many? There's definitely at least like 4 people working on building this cloud for like over a year for us to get this far. So me building like the full automation and all that stuff, this is why members are now going to help. So now, instead of me just showing everyone how it works, the skills to even use this, that a lot of that is what the DevSecOps Dojo is about, because I got to teach everyone these things somehow. So once again, let's put everyone to work for yourselves, really. And one of the other reasons why GitLab, if you start doing things and contributing things, your code in GitLab is your code, and your contributions in GitLab are your contributions, and your contributions are your portfolio. As a developer, I see it this way. So it's like you could spend 3 months getting a certification for code or something, I don't know. Or you could spend 3 months building a project. And let's say you do spend that 3 months building a project, right? Then you have a portfolio item instead of a certification. And a portfolio is quite fancy. I always see like, oh, you can actually make a thing? Wow, it works? Can you show it to me? Wow, can you explain how it worked? Well, explain that to me. Well, explain that to me. Well, if you made it, you can explain it. Versus like a certification, you might have an Azure certification and not even know how to actually build a cloud at all. And we scale to Azure. So if we scale to Azure, I still have to know, like, beyond a certification, I got to know how to strap all my code. I got to know how to manage my integrations. I got to know how a sidecar proxy works. I don't know. I got to know how to load balance the thing. I got to understand what an API is. It gets really complicated. You also have to understand compute. And with cloud, one of the big ones is you do have to understand economics at least somewhat. If you don't understand any of the cloud economics in cloud, and you're doing like DevSecOps and you're like not managing your budget well, that's how you end up like losing your project when all of a sudden you couldn't meet your cloud bills and you are renting someone else's cloud, but you can't afford the bill, I hope you didn't have anything important in there when you suddenly couldn't afford that. Well, I mean, you have to save up and come up with the bill and get your bill paid up, or get a loan or something. I don't know. Get a loan if you can't afford your cloud bills. Hey. But if I teach folks the economics of it, you can learn how to avoid having to get a loan because you didn't realize that you ended up spending way too much on your cloud build, and now this thing you've been working on for 6 months, you can't even afford to like maintain the billing for it. Gotta understand some of the you gotta understand some of the economics. You can't just get around without like understanding the economics. I know, like it sounds boring, or it sounds like, oh, but I'm a developer, and I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, but I do development, I don't do that stuff. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, but I don't really know my value. It's like, of course you don't know your value, because you don't think about the economics. So anyways, those are some thoughts, a lot of thoughts, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for now. I guess if there's any final questions, let me know. If no one asks a question pretty soon here, certainly feel free to ask questions in the dojo. I will be in the dojo because I'm always in the dojo. It's that code hustle. I never escape it. But anyways, thanks for building with us. For anyone who wants to join actually building a startup, it is what it sounds like. Since we are building a startup, I guess for anyone who wants to get on board, to join the dojo, you go to cloudunderground.dev. And there's the DevSecOps Dojo. And we have a new sign-in because our front end uses an AI. So this kind of goes back to, like, we CI/CD like everything. So I use GitLab to help manage like my LinkedIn. I use it to help manage my like Google Analytics, all that stuff. It's all complicated, but we use this AI system. Anyone who joins, it will say welcome to you when you join. And the new sign up, just to like make sure that people are aware that there's this thing going on, that AI gonna be tracking you. So when you go and you fill this out, it's not evil or malicious. The way that the AI works is it's consent based, and the way that I made it consent based is it's cookie based. Based on your cookies. And this, of course, is just the front end of it. It has a whole lot more going on in the back end that's kind of crazy, which it involves like Google tagging. We use Facebook Insights in there somewhere because Facebook is creepy as can be and has a whole lot of data. And if you're trying to be competitive in the market, maybe I shouldn't even tell people that I use that data too, because it's just too good. But anyways, the AI uses all that for machine learning. It uses LinkedIn's data for machine learning. It uses public web, but it uses cookies. So if you don't want the AI to track something, don't accept a cookie. Like, reject those cookies. But anyways, if you sign up for this, it even says it has a cookie policy, so you can take a look at the cookie policy. Because once again, I just want to be clear with people, what technologies are used, right? And this is just like full disclosure here, because we do use, like, you're signing into a full-on system. It's an AI system. It's a sensor, and it brings jobs to you. It tries to find like career building opportunities to you. It tries to help you find people who you might work well with, whether you're trying to find a job, like an employer, or you're trying to find like more customers. Those are like the two general things that it tries to like match you up with. Like, let's try to find some cool people that you might like talking to or working with. Maybe you want to start a podcast and you wish that you had a co-founder or a co-host for your podcast. Maybe you're trying to do, but anyways, it just tries to auto match you, and then you can control that with your cookies. And so if you go to some random website and it has those little cookie pop-ups, and you don't want the AI to like pay attention to what you do with that website or what, just don't accept the cookies. And you can delete your cookies, by the way, because that's how cookies work in your browser. Go in your browser and delete cookies that you don't want the AI to work with. And what this means is that by signing up with this, it allows you to use your own cookie data. Posting on LinkedIn when signing up for this means that you're using your own cookie data to help you get opportunities with an AI. That's what it is. So why do we do it that way? It's for developers. And so if we're talking to someone who's not a developer, like someone who wants to be, I don't know, like a marketing person, do they care about this? No, they're going to go market. People who are developers don't want to self-market themselves, generally speaking. And so we've come up with a way for developers to engineer opportunities without having to be out in the socials and put themselves out so that you can code your way to where you want to be. Oh, there we go. But yeah, so anyways, we use LinkedIn to let people code their ways to where they want to be. And we start off with the simple version is just make a post. And then later on, we alley-oop that into how to use, which I haven't gotten the trainings out for this yet. I need to get the trainings out for this, but Zapier has a means for doing integrations, which you can then integrate all kinds of things. But one of the things that we want to encourage is using GitLab for documenting your development journey and what you're doing. So depending on what work you already do, to get the most out of the AI, you can use Zapier to, let's see. You can do a lot of things with Zapier. Zapier's kind of awesome. I don't know. Zapier, let's see. So if we go to Zapier, you can have some, like, let's say that you have a YouTube channel. Oh, come on, thing. Instead of clicking through their website, I'll just pull it up through Google because I'm lazy. Oh, LinkedIn, not through LinkedIn. I want the LinkedIn integrations. Here we go. So Zapier, there we go. You can integrate LinkedIn with all kinds of things. And so for people kind of like just getting into things, then instead of just like throwing you off the deep end into like hardcore code and Docker and Kubernetes, we start you off with the lightweight things that do help your brand work, which is if you're trying to like make a project work, you really need to automate these bits first anyways, if you really want to have the least amount of effort to find a home for your skills. Once again, least amount of effort, find a home for your skills, start doing the self-marketing the minute you start your journey trying to learn. Take everyone with you on your learning journey. If you take everyone with you on your learning journey, that's what opens doors. And then we teach you how to automate the means of taking everyone on that journey with you through LinkedIn, then power that with AI. And then you have an AI-powered automation funnel that automatically goes out and takes, maybe you make like YouTube videos, when you upload those, it'll automatically post the link to LinkedIn. Or maybe you make a GitLab commit and you're trying to share your GitLab commits, then it goes out and shares your new GitLab commit over to LinkedIn. Or, I could say or all day long. You can have everything that you code and update and commit go straight to LinkedIn so that you're constantly creating a journey for yourself and creating data points. And then once it's automated, you never even have to think about your self-marketing anymore. You just suddenly start getting DMs with people being like, hey, you want to work with me? Can we do some work together? Can I pay you? Can I pay you as whatever you're worth? I don't know. Probably worth something if you can code your own life, right? Engineer your life so that you don't even have to think about these things. Is it passive? Not quite, because you have to engineer it. After you engineer it, I guess you could think of it as passive, but it's automated. Automated usually means that there's an inhuman amount of effort up front that might not be very exciting. So these are all things you can get going with, and Zapier has a free version. GitLab has a free version. Docker's free. I guess those are the big ones. So yeah, that covers a lot of stuff, and I covered how you can get some of the foundational skills. So for anyone who's getting into the research boards and you're trying to figure out what to do with those YAML files, check out that Swarm Rocks link that I added in the GitLab. And then anyone who's trying to get their hands dirty with Kubernetes, check out that RPi4 cluster link that I was talking about. And ultimately, we're going to start this company. We're going to start learning some things together for whoever joins.